We see circumstances in our lives that we wish we could change, but the reality is if God is not changing those circumstances, He's probably looking to change us. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video, we're talking about how God is using the relational friction in your life. We're talking about those relationships that are just hard. Maybe there's somebody who you're around all the time who really just bothers you, or maybe there's a relationship that isn't necessarily bad, but it's just continually presenting for you uncomfortable situations. Maybe they gossip a lot and you don't really know how to respond, or maybe they're unintentionally hurting other people in your life and you feel a responsibility to say something, but you don't really know how to go about that. Or maybe it's a person who just feels draining to be around, or maybe it's a person who you just get the sense doesn't really like you and you're not really sure what you did. Whatever the specific scenario may be, I think we've all been in those situations before where we have experienced relational friction. And if you're anything like me, when you do experience relational friction, you kind of just wish the circumstance would change, right? You wish that that person would change their behavior so that you don't have to deal with the uncomfortability of the situation or the irritation of the situation. But what I've often found is that in those situations, God is usually trying to change me. He's wanting to use the relational friction for a good purpose. And so in today's video, we're going to be talking about how God is using the relational friction in your life. As a disclaimer, we are not talking here about situations of abuse. In these situations, God does not just call you to keep taking the abuse. In these situations, it is necessary to create some space. And so I just want to remind you that I always have a link down below to BetterHelp. It's an incredible, quick, easy way to get connected with an amazing Christian counselor. And so if you're dealing with a situation like this, or if you have just been wanting to try out Christian counseling for any other reason, I'm going to leave my link down in the description. It'll also get you 10% off. So that is not what we're talking about in this video. In this video, we're just talking about those everyday irritations and frictions with people in your life that you maybe can't necessarily escape. What is God doing through that? Before we get into it, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. I make Christian faith and lifestyle content aimed at encouraging you to know God more through His Word and to grow in His likeness. And I would love to have you here, and then give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful or encouraging. To kick off this conversation, I want to take a look at a very popular verse found in the book of Proverbs. So Proverbs is a book of wisdom that shows us how to live according to God's design to best experience life as He designed it. And a little fun fact for you, the book of Proverbs has 31 chapters. And so a lot of times people will read a proverb a day to kind of glean that wisdom. This is something I've done before and highly recommend it. As the saying goes, a proverb a day keeps the foolishness away. And so that's a little bit on Proverbs, but here's the verse we're looking at today. It's Proverbs 27:17, and it says, "Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another." Now, I always saw this as an encouraging, positive verse. I applied it not to relationships where there was friction or frustration, but I applied it to my best friends in the Lord who encourage me in the Lord, who point me to Him, who make me want to know Him more by the way that they live their lives and the way that they pursue Him, who encourage me, who pray for me, who build me up. If you've been around my channel for a while, and if you happened to be here when my friend Anna and I were roomies, you might know that we often refer to our friendship as a Proverbs 27:17 friendship, because our friendship in general, and even more specifically our time of living together, made us both grow in our walks with God in really incredible and beautiful ways. And that's not to say that we didn't ever have hard conversations or things that we needed to work through, because we did, but overall it was and continues to be just this really beautiful friendship that is uplifting, that builds us up in the Lord. So I always saw this verse primarily as positive, like a feel-good kind of friendship verse, and it definitely can be, but when you unpack the meaning of it a little bit more, you see that it very much applies to those hard, frictional, irritating, frustrating relationships as well. Iron sharpens iron. The end result of that is essentially saying that two people, by being in close relationship with one another, make each other better. But if you think about it a little bit more, how does that sharpening happen? It happens through friction. A note on this from the Enduring Word commentary says, "A piece of iron can sharpen another piece of iron, but it happens through striking, friction, and with sparks." We think here of the iron of a blacksmith's hammer working on a sword to keep it sharp. And another quote I found in a commentary on this verse says, "The analogy infers that the friend persists and does not shy away from critical, constructive criticism." This makes me think of the time when my college roomie, who was one of my best friends, had a hard conversation with me where she sat down and told me that I had been defensive and that it had been hurtful to her. And what did I feel welling up inside me when she was telling me this? Defensiveness, because in my mind, she was saying, you are a defensive person, you are bad, you are flawed. And everything in me believed that if I had to own this behavior, then that would make me unworthy of her love, of her friendship, and maybe of anybody else's friendship as well. But in that moment, I realized that her willingness to have this hard conversation with me was in and of itself evidence of her commitment to me, that she wanted to be my friend, that she wasn't just going to sweep this under the rug and pull away because I was hurting her, that she wanted to bring up this thing that was coming in between us relationally so that it could be resolved. And honestly, that conversation was so pivotal to me because it was such a huge picture of the gospel, that the gospel says that we are more flawed than we could ever believe, but also more loved in that because of Christ. And I ended up being so thankful for my friend's willingness to have this conversation with me and to make me aware of this blind spot, because through that I was able to see where I had a tendency to be defensive, and in that God was enabling me to grow. Friends that are willing to have those hard conversations with us because they care about us and they love us and they want to see us grow, or friends who are willing to ask the hard questions to get at our heart motivation so we can examine them before the Lord, or friends who are willing to hold us accountable in areas of sin or temptation. I think of our mentor friends, Buzz and Tara, who very much kept us accountable in our season of engagement leading up to marriage in terms of physical boundaries. I have a whole video on that linked above. Those friends are worth their weight in gold. Hold onto them. Proverbs 27:6 says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy." This is basically saying that the person who only ever tells you what you want to hear and flatters you doesn't actually love you in the same way the person does who is willing to speak to you the hard truths. So iron sharpens iron through this type of friction, the sort of constructive criticism, conversation type of friction, but iron also sharpens iron through the friction of those little annoyances. And if God has somebody in your life, He has them in your life for a purpose. Like I talked about in my video on how to go from lukewarm to on fire for God, people and relationships are messy. We all have our rugged edges, and those rugged edges are going to poke at each other, but those rugged edges are ultimately meant to refine one another. Let's walk through those examples we listed off at the beginning. That person who annoys you, maybe ask yourself, well, why do they annoy you? Do they annoy you maybe because they talk incessantly or because they take a lot of time to process their thoughts? Could it be that God is using this person to grow you in patience? Do they annoy you because they seem really self-absorbed and only ever talk about themselves or their accomplishments? Could it be that God is maybe using this to reflect back where that is also true of you in some ways? Or maybe even just that you really enjoy talking in conversations and God is using this person to teach you to simply listen? Does this person annoy you because they're always running late? Could it be that God is using this person to grow you in being gracious, or even potentially to grow you in learning to step up and have those uncomfortable conversations when they become necessary, rather than shying away from them and just continuing to secretly be annoyed? What about that person who's always gossiping? Maybe you're uncomfortable saying that you prefer not to talk badly about another person because you don't want to come across as judgmental, or you don't want them not to like you, or you don't want them to now go start gossiping about you to other people. Could this be God giving you an opportunity to grow through learning how to navigate speaking the truth in this situation in love? Or could He be causing you to grow in letting go of what you can't control, which is how this person is going to respond to you or how they are going to perceive you? What about that person who is unintentionally hurting other people in your life and you resent them because you're now having to be put in this uncomfortable position of needing to say something when you would much rather just go with the flow and not have a hard conversation? But what if God is calling you to grow and calling you to rise up and do just that? What about that person who doesn't like you, and no matter what you do, you just can't seem to win them over? Could it be that God is exposing in your heart the idolatry of being admired by people and stripping you of that? Personally, I've been in all of these situations at one point or another, and I know there's so many other examples and situations and scenarios where relational friction could occur. But what I've learned is almost every instance of relational friction I've experienced is actually an opportunity for me to grow. It all comes back to what is the goal of the Christian life, which I talked more about in this video right up here. But if you are in Christ, God's goal for your life is to conform you to the image of his Son, Jesus Christ. To make you look more like him, to strip away sin from your life, to purify you, to make you holy as he is holy. We see circumstances in our lives that we wish we could change, but the reality is if God is not changing those circumstances, he's probably looking to change us. More than our comfort, God cares about our character, and he often uses situations of relational friction to develop it. I would love to hear from you down in the comments. How is God using an uncomfortable relationship in your life to grow you? Or how has he done that in the past? I'm going to be sharing my answer to that question in a pinned comment down below as well. And remember, you do not need to spill the tea of the situation itself, and I would encourage you not to, and to not veer into gossip in that way, but just talk about the positive part of how God is using it to grow you. I look forward to reading through those comments. Thank you so much for being here in this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.